Alrighty, we will go ahead and get started. Jamie, Paul, and Jason, if you could turn on your cameras so all of our attendees can see the beautiful faces. Okay, welcome to the Local District Esports Best Practices and Setup webinar. My name is Tanner Litchfield. I'm the esports specialist here at Micro K-12. I'm joined by Jamie Woodards of the Anacortes High School, the esports head coach, and Paul Marenco of O'Day High School, the esports moderator, and Jason Dilley, the Sedro-Wooley High School esports head coach. So without further ado, I'm going to start off this webinar with a poll question that should be showing up on all of your screens here in a second. Okay, the question is, what do you see as the biggest obstacle for starting an esports program? And we want you to select more than one if there is more than one. We know there can be a lot, so feel free to select more than one and we'll see what happens. Awesome. Okay, 31 of 32, that's pretty good for the voting. Let's end the polling. I'll share the results so all you can see it. So it looks like funding is definitely the #1 obstacle, which does not surprise me. Getting the right equipment is up there as well. So hopefully through this webinar, we'll be able to shed some light on some of these obstacles and help all of you. So without further ado, let's stop sharing the results. I'm going to turn the time over to Jamie Woodards.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Woodards. I'm the esports head coach at Anacortes High School. And so I'm actually the new coach as of September of this year. And so this has been a learning experience for me as well. It's been very enjoyable. But some things I wanted to talk about this morning were one being inclusiveness. We do not have that many females or women in our esports club. There's probably one who actively plays, and she's actually holds a position in the esports club. We do have a couple of girls that show up sometimes when we have our meetings on Wednesdays after school, and sometimes they do show support when we have our tournaments on Thursdays. But for me, I'm just trying to figure out more ways to have more diversity in our esports club. Also, I think it's important if schools are able to, gaming classes, they're considered CTE classes. And so I think that if schools were able to basically implement some type of gaming class for students, I do know some students who take gaming classes online, but if we could actually have a gaming class at the high school, I think we would have a lot of participants. There are a lot of students who are very active or very interested in esports. I've had some students email me last week. Actually, they're rising freshmen, and they have already emailed me with questions about the esports club, just making sure that we're still going to have it next year, and things like that, and what games are allowed and not allowed to be played. And so for me, I was really excited when the previous head coach sent out an email asking if anyone was interested in being an esports coach. I have 2 boys, 11 and 7, and we have a game room downstairs that my husband said that we needed to have in our house. So we have 3 TVs, 3 Xboxes, And so my kids, they're younger, so they love to play Fortnite. We let them play Call of Duty with the blood and bad words turned off. But I remember when I was a kid, I would always play Nintendo. And I remember my parents saying to me, "You're spending too much time. That is not good for your brain. You're not learning anything from that." And so now we've seen, and I even told my own sons that before, like, "Oh, you guys don't need an Xbox. You're not learning anything from that." But then, for instance, I watched them play Fortnite, and they're able to play with their cousin who lives down in Tampa, Florida, and they have their headsets on and they're communicating with each other. And for me, it's they're learning how to work with, basically be a team player. And they're also learning strategies, with all of those things. And esports is evolving so much. Universities are offering full ride esports scholarships to students. So it's evolving and becoming more and more popular. So thank you, Tanner.
Of course. Thank you, Jamie, for all of that. Now, as for our transition, we're going to open for another poll question, but I wanted to put in a side note. If you guys have any questions, which again, we encourage the questions, go ahead and put them in the question and answer, and then we'll get to those with our live Q&A at the end. So we want to encourage all of you to do that. And if you have any immediate questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll see what we can do. But the Q&A will be where we want you to put the questions in, and then we'll get to them at the live Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time. Sorry, before I get to Paul, I almost forgot about the poll. So this one, let's launch the poll. How far along are you in the process of adopting an esports program? Okay, awesome. I'm going to share the results with all of you. So right now, the number one is I'm just starting my journey and trying to learn more. So we're glad to be a part of the journey with all of you. Okay, now let's turn the time over to Paul, like I said I was going to do earlier, but I had an interruption. Here's Paul Marenco.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul. I'm the music director over at O'Day High School and also the esports moderator. I'm just going to talk to you about how we have started with our esports program. This is I've done it for 2 years, and my best advice would be to start small. Don't try to do everything all at once. It can be pretty overwhelming because it's not just one esports. It's not really one esports team. It's really several esports team. If you think about the different games and the different tournaments and everything that you have available to you. So I'm going to switch screens here real quick just for my own benefit. So a great way to start small is to start with a console game. That's to say like an Xbox or a PlayStation. Nintendo Switch is probably the easiest. That's what we did at O'Day. We started with a Nintendo Switch and we did Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And one of the benefits of that is the accessibility, right? The entry cost is pretty low. I won't get into too much detail. I think Jason might be covering more of that. But the accessibility is such that most of the students that are interested probably already have one. So when it comes to providing equipment, you probably don't need to do a lot. And a lot of the students will already be playing that particular game. So once you sort of have that and you have your players who are interested, the next thing you want to do is add some structure. A lot of the students who are interested in esports who have, not really done it before, aren't used to a structured system of competing with video games. And it's kind of up to you to add that structure. I can only really tell you what we've done at O'Day, but ultimately, you have to find out what works best for you. So what we did at O'Day was we created a ranking system. And I guess it could be, you could think of it like varsity and junior varsity, if that makes it easier. But I ended up doing an A team, which was the top 5 ranked players, and then the B team, which was all the other players that were actively participating but weren't the top 5. And then what was beneficial about that was it pushed the students to try to move up in that standing. And what I saw was the A team players would sort of coach the B team players and help them move up, and ultimately resulted in everyone being, getting better, but also had that, improved their communication, worked on fostering team building and all of that. So yeah, that kind of structure. Another thing that would be good would be to make sure you have good student leaders. The student leaders don't have to be the best players by any means, but they are going to be the ones who are eager to work with you and communicate with both adults and students effectively. And I had a few positions that were ultimately invaluable to me. I had a student who managed the club's Discord, because I sure couldn't do that on my own. And then I had I had a general team captain, and then there was a position that we called the emissary, who was really proud of that title. And that student would reach out to other schools to set up tournaments or practices or anything like that. And then one last position that I had was a digital media assistant, and that was somebody who helped me with streams, helped create graphics for the streams and things like that. Okay, so once you've got all that set up, and your students have been practicing and being active, and you have that effective communication and team building in place, the next thing is really to get them to compete. And you have HSEL, which is great, and you have Play Versus, which is great, although I don't think Play Versus has Smash Brothers. Hopefully they will in the future. But there are tons, at least for Smash Brothers, of tournaments that are held locally. And while it might not be possible to go in person in the foreseeable future, there are still going to be lots of tournaments that are held online. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, that kind of competition is also going to be what drives a lot of the students' need to get better and their drive to improve. So yeah, like I said, a lot of those tournaments can be held online. And if none of that really works out for you, or maybe you just really want to host your own tournament. O'Day did one in the beginning of the last school year where we invited the other Catholic schools. And that was just because the administration felt more comfortable inviting the Catholic high schools. But we were planning on inviting more of the public schools that are, in the Seattle area. And that gives your students a chance to lead, the chance to figure out how to put together a large scale event like that, and to learn how to be hosts, which is a great experience for a lot of these students who otherwise don't get the chance. Or, put an online tournament together. And if you do, invite O'Day, because we're showing up. We're eager to do it, and my kids will go nuts. But yeah, I think that's really the best way to get started is start small, pick a game that your students are passionate about. And that doesn't have to be Smash Brothers. It could be Madden. It can be NBA, 2K. It could even be Fortnite. It really could. So just start there and, see what interest shows up. And if you get a lot of activity with one game, the interest for other games is just gonna start cropping up. Students will come in with, hey, what about this game? Hey, what about that game? And once you have those numbers, it's easier to start that conversation about funding with your administration. All right, well, thank you for that. Thank you for your attention. And I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back to Tanner.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. So our last poll question, this one's going to be a little bit lighthearted, more lighthearted. Okay, so this question, let's launch it to all of you. What esports games are you most excited about? And for those of you who don't know what these games are, we made sure to include an option. I don't know what these games are / other. So if that's you, don't feel embarrassed. You can select that one. Okay. Share the results. So it looks like League of Legends was #1, but not by far. Rocket League, Super Smash Bros, sports games, Overwatch. There's a lot of games that are really popular, as you can see from this poll. And these are all options for esport teams. So now moving on, I'm going to turn the time over to Jason Dilley from Sedro-Wooley High School. And he's going to talk to you more about esports.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I think you guys have already started asking some really good questions in the chat. Really important things there to talk about. I think what I was going to focus my time on was just some sort of foundational, like beginning steps. Things that if you haven't done these, they're definitely the things you want to do in the future, the near future. So first would be who to talk to. And there's definitely a portion of people within your school and within your district that you want to have on your side when it comes to something like this. And so these are, I think, the people that you really want to talk to before you go to students. Like, I think Paul really outlined a great thing to do with your students once you're ready to start those things. For these ones, I'm talking more about like employees and community members that you would want to make sure you have on your side. #1, make sure your site principal is definitely there. When we talk about people who have the power to institute change, your principal is definitely the most important person on that list. They're the ones that are going to help you talk to every other group that you need to talk to make sure things are running smoothly. So getting your principal on your side is fantastic. If you need materials or like the kinds of things that you should be saying in terms of benefits of esports, you can always reach out. There's lots of people who would give you like great answers to those things if you have a principal that is skeptical. But yeah, a supportive principal, absolutely #1 most important thing, because they're going to help you go through the hoops that you need to at like your district office or even your school board, depending on what needs to happen there. So #1, principal. #2, get to know your IT people really, really well. There's a lot of challenges that come with online play and school networks, because there's a lot of these like gaming sites are usually blocked by your school's firewall. And so you have to come up with interesting ways around that. So there's again, make sure your IT people are on your side. Do them nice favors and bake them cookies, because they're going to have to do a lot of work on their end to make certain things work. Just to give you a small example, so Super Smash Brothers is a really, really popular game. As Paul was saying, we did some league play this last fall with a group of schools that is coordinating tournaments there in Washington State. We had a small school in Eastern Washington who going to their personal IT people at their building wasn't enough. the way that their IT infrastructure was set up, they actually had to go to somebody at their ESD level. So like it was beyond their district personnel. They had to go to ESD to get something fixed in the network infrastructure, just so that Super Smash Brothers players could connect with other schools. So get to know those people really well. Make sure that they are happy, because they have to do lots of things to make it work well for what you guys are doing. And then I would say the other people you want to talk to, a lot of people here I saw are athletic directors or ASB or some of those things. One of the challenges in the beginning of when you're setting up your program is, where are you going to house your esports program? Is it going to be under the athletics department? Is it going to be under the ASB department? Or is it going to be under the CTE department? So you want to make sure that you have a clear vision of where that's going to go. And I say that as kind of a lead in to the next part, which is funding. Because where you're housing your esports can determine a lot of what's happening for your funding. It is my recommendation that you look at esports as a CTE program, because it follows under a lot of like 21st century skill building, and there are so many aspects to what we're doing with esports that fall under important CTE skills, that you can consider it a CTE program. There are CTSOs to be formed out there around some of these competitions, not necessarily the playing of the games competitions, but there's other groups that are trying to start things to do, like a streaming competition, right? Like people who are broadcasting and shoutcasting and those kinds of things, and marketing and all of that. So that's always my recommendation. The other recommendation I have, which really falls under funding, is there are CTE money available that you can use to improve other programs at your school, where the esports can just kind of like tag on top of it. So if you have something that is CTE related there, like let's say you want to upgrade what your computers. I'll just tell you my story about how I got the esports lab that we have at my school. We wanted to upgrade our computer science program. We wanted to be able to do Unity programming and 3D modeling and things like that, which we just couldn't do on the machines that we had. And so we applied for a CTE grant to upgrade that system. I want to say it was the CTE high need grant. I have a list of different grants that would actually qualify. I was looking for it in my Google thing when they were talking, and I couldn't find it. But there's definitely those grants in there where you can use it to improve something at your school, and then esports can just kind of tag along. With us, it was our computer science program. Myself and my computer science teacher, we kind of went to our district together and said, if we get these computers and we just upgrade the video card a little bit and add a little bit of RAM, we can accomplish both of these things at the same time. So our computer science program got an upgrade, and our esports program got a place to stay. So we use our computer science room as our esports lab. And that was really useful for us to be able to have both finding a space to house where our esports programs meet, and also to be able to pay for it. Because really, computers are the most expensive thing that you're going to have to happen with your esports program. Consoles and such are definitely a cheaper alternative. As Paul was saying, if you're looking to start on the cheap, getting in with Super Smash Brothers, you will have interest at your school for that game, and you can absolutely use student devices when that's happening, because it's what am I trying to say? And then you're not paying for anything from the school for that. So you can kind of get started on the cheap that way. But like the big ticket item is going to be computers. And whether you do 6 computers, which is enough for housing an Overwatch team, or if you're going to outfit an entire lab, CTE funding and grants can do that. I want to say that the grant that we got was like $20,000, and then we pitched in $10,000 to $15,000, and that's how we were able to pay for a full lab of computers. So There's definitely other funding resources out there, but I think the most reliable ones are the CTE grants that you can get to upgrade your other programs. Again, esports, you put esports as like the secondary benefit of what you're doing. What you really want to do is upgrade another one of your programs to be more modern, and then esports just kind of comes along with it. There's a lot to talk about under funding, and so I would recognize if you guys have like a lot of additional if you have a lot of additional questions about that one. But I want to talk a little bit about types of play. And I always say that with your gaming, you want to have a gaming club that is both community-based and competitive-based, because you've got a much different group of players. My esports teams this year had about 50 to 55 competitive players. I was going through my list because we gave out varsity letters for what we did this year. So I think it was right around there is how many kids earned a varsity letter. And so that's a number of different games throughout the year. But then there's also just this big community side of kids who love to game, but they don't want to, they're not necessarily competitive about it. So making sure that you have a balance of both competitive events and community events. We always get more people to our community events than we do with any of our competitive events. Our first community event that we did last year, we ended up with like 75, 80 kids in the library. And this was just a casual Super Smash Brothers Ultimate play time. We had 8 different systems set up, and it was a really good time. But because we didn't have like that competitive aspect of it, a lot more kids were willing to show up and just kind of hang out and be part of a group, which is also an extremely important aspect of what we do within our clubs and within our schools, right? Having places for kids to feel accepted is a really important thing to provide for our kids. So I think that's all of the major points that I wanted to hit, and like I said, I've got lots of things out there to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Jason. Before we go into the live question and answer, I want to show you guys a little bit about what Micro K-12 is offering. So this is a bundle we put together, a starter bundle. This will work for all the games that you guys would want to compete in. So we have the MSI Trident 3 gaming computer, MSI gaming keyboard and mouse, MSI gaming headset, and the ViewSonic 24-inch curved gaming monitor. All of this right now is at $1070. If you want a quote for this, feel free to email me, or esports@microk12.com will also come to me. And when we have the live Q&A, I'll put our contact information up so that you can write that down, whatever it may be, for all the teachers that spoke today, but also for myself. So now let's go into the live question and answer. I'll be delegating this, but we'll have our teachers be there as resources. So the first one, is there a curriculum or framework out there for a CTE class, sorry. Feel free, Jason, Jamie, Paul, whoever wants to answer this one, to chime right in.
Yeah, I've said it in the chat, but I'll say it out here. I do have a CTE approved OSP. It's been approved by CTE OSPI. It's called Introduction to Esports Careers, and I'm going to put a link in the chat because I can show you where I got the inspiration for this. So that link that I just put in the chat for everybody, it comes from a group called NASEF. North American Scholastic Esports Federation. They have curriculum materials on that website. They are also a competitive league, but there's a little graphic on there that says that talks about basically what the esports ecosystem looks like. And so the class that I'm developing hits all 4 of those different sort of content areas. So there's going to be a big unit on streaming and broadcasting and shoutcasting, like how do you run a Twitch channel, how do you monetize YouTube, those kind of things. the strategist side, I have a unit called it's theory crafting. And I've actually taught this unit for a couple years in some of my math classes, where we use the game League of Legends, and we do different we do different equipment loadouts. So in that game, you can buy different equipment for yourself to increase how much damage you do. And so we learn a lot about statistics and means and standard deviations, and how to tell the difference of like when something's performing. And then we do different loadouts. Like I have them play the game and make different loadouts, and we do different DPS tests to find out like which one is better in terms of your overall damage. There's going to be a unit on digital marketing and social media to hit that entrepreneurs part in the bottom. And then on the left, under the organizers section, IT support and event organizing is going to be on there. I think somebody else in the chat said that they've got something for digital marketing, which would also, for esports planning, which would probably fall under that area. So, and I'm 100% able to share those frameworks for anybody. You just have to message me, and I'll share the frameworks that I have. I can't say that the curriculum is all developed yet, because like the only unit that is done is my theory crafting one, and that's because I've done it before. But like I'm not like planning to package this or anything like that. So I can share what I have as I make it for the other ones, because I haven't done those ones yet. They're not created.
Awesome. So before we go into the next question, there was a question that was already asked and answered, but Paul wanted to talk a little bit more about that with inclusiveness and getting young women involved in esports. So Paul, what was your 2 cents that you wanted to add into this topic? Because it's an important one.
Yeah, and it's really important to me in particular. The topic of inclusiveness and for me, and getting young women involved are really the same topic in a way. I mean, I want to start out by saying that having a structured esports program is already a huge step forward in inclusiveness, because a lot of the students that you get who want to participate in these programs don't feel like they have much of anything else to do at a high school or wherever it is they are. So the fact that they would be able to have this opportunity and to have their talents shine, and for them to get a chance to represent their school is a huge, it's huge for them, right? It's a huge deal. And then as far as getting young women involved, and I know it's weird coming from me because I teach at O'Day, which is all boys, but it is one of the reasons why I was so eager to take up the position for esports moderator was so that I could be one of the people who taught the boys how to be a responsible member of that gaming community, because I think everyone's aware of how toxic that community can be. And I think a lot of that is because it has existed kind of in the margins for a long time. And so, a lot of the people who game and who are really into it don't or have never had that kind of guidance to know how to responsibly interact with other people. So I think one of the ways to get more young women involved would be to teach all of the participants how to be good citizens, digital citizens. And that especially for young men who tend to, for some young men who tend to be misogynistic when they game, to make sure you stamp that out, to demonstrate and to really, to make sure that it has no place in your program. And that way young women feel more comfortable, because we know that young women game and they want to, but they may not always feel comfortable unless there is a safe environment in which to do so. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Paul.
Can I just add on really quick?
Yes, please do, Jason.
I 100% agree with everything Paul said. Those are things that we're trying to do with our program as well. The thing that I would add on what we've done to get more girls involved, most of the girls on our team were not the result of doing a mass call out. So we put on the announcements, hey, it's esports time, everybody come and sign up. Girls don't typically show up to that. I think we had one girl show up to that meeting, and that's because, like, you know, she's really passionate about Overwatch. But most of the girls on our team were a result of, like, myself and my co-coach, like, intentionally talking to specific girls that we knew were gamers and
Mhm.
encouraging them to show up. Because the stigma is so bad, it is also often a very intimidating environment for them to come into, and so it really was like we are specifically targeting you because we know that you would be interested in doing this, and that's how we got them to show up. We are still way underrepresented in the number of girls that on our team, but it's a battle. Like, you have to, like, you have to, like, intentionally make these decisions to get more girls involved. Otherwise, they don't just show up when you say, "Hey, come show up. It's esports." So,
I would like to add
Go ahead.
something as well. I think for me, because I am the head coach, so obviously I'm a female, so that makes a huge difference. And what I've noticed from September until probably the very beginning of March, before, you know, COVID, is that there were more females, not necessarily playing, but I would say, hey, you know, anyone is welcome to come to our meetings on Wednesdays, because our meetings, after the meetings are finished, they basically compete for the slots for Thursday, because we have a JV and a varsity team. And so I have noticed that there have been more females who have showed up just to watch. And I think for me, that's something, at least that kind of sparks an interest. You know, they can kind of see what games we're playing and, like, oh, okay, well, you know, I've heard about Smash Brothers or Smash Bros, but okay, that's actually a really cool game. And they also have a lot of female characters on the game, which are really awesome and cool. And so we also have an active player on one of our teams, and she actually holds a position in the esports club. And I also think that makes a difference as well. And so for me, I want to get more diversity in the club, not just females, but, you know, other diverse students into the club, because again, like Jason was saying, those gamers are normally, they're a specific type of student who, for them, like, I've had teachers walk by and they say, Jamie, this is so awesome. Those kids, they look so happy every time I pass by. You know, they look so just engaged with one another. You know, you could have a group of students who are playing, you know, the games. They're very respectful on Thursdays when we have competitions. The other people are going around like, shh, you know, be quiet, because, you know, they want to concentrate and they want to win, you know. So, but anyways, long story short, I think that makes a difference, because when you have teachers also in the school who they don't know anything about any of these games, I think that also makes a big difference as well, as far as getting more students involved in the club.
That's awesome. And then Chris just put in the chat to us panelists that he had a good idea to strongly encourage the boys to each bring a female friend that plays. We require there to be at least one female per competitive team. And I think that is an awesome idea. One thing that Micro K-12 is trying to do for diversity, allowing women to play in the games and encouraging it, is the marketing. So we want to make sure that there's a visual that women are seen gaming. And so for the schools, having on the flyers women gaming alongside with men to encourage the inclusiveness and diversity, I think is an awesome point as well.
Representation is important.
Yes, exactly. So on to the next question. Do you recommend having some sort of waiver in place for kids, families to sign, allowing them to play different games like first-person shooters? If so, does anyone have a copy of something that they use?
I'll go ahead and start with that. That's a really great question. My administration just prefers that we don't play games like that. And you know, and for us, in order to get a program off the ground, I figured I would just stick with games that are rated teen and below. But I think that would be a good idea, just so that, you know, so the parents are aware of the type of games that their students are going to be playing. But I think Jason probably knows a bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, I would recommend having them sign something. We in our program just have like our parent letter that goes out. It talks about a little bit about the games we play, when practice times are, and just a variety of different information. The other thing that I would say is, depending on the league that you join, a lot of them will have specific things that go out to parents in order to play. Like NASF, in order to participate in NASF, they have both a student sign thing and a parent sign thing that you all do on DocuSign, that just addresses a couple of those issues. They also have to address things like that with privacy. Privacy laws that have to do, what is it, COPPA, COPPA, the things to sign off on that. So I'm willing to send out my my parent letter that I use. It doesn't actually have a lot about the first person shooter stuff. I feel like a lot of that you probably want to deal with on your administrative end rather than like with specific parents. My district's been really supportive, and so we kind of they let us play basically anything. But I know that that's not the norm for everything. I would imagine that if you've got it set through that it's clear through your administration and your school board, that you probably don't need something specific that says it's okay for them to play first person shooters, as long as there's an understanding of what people are doing.
Awesome. Okay, the next question. A lot of the esports career options I have seen out there are focused more on the production side rather than players. Are we seeing any high schools place an emphasis on content creation rather than playing?
Can I say something? Oh, sorry, Jason. So I always listen to my students on the Wednesdays and Thursdays that we have. Wednesdays, like I said, are meetings, and Thursdays are competitions. And a lot of them have told me that they've like created games, and these are all things that they do in their own time. A lot of them, as I'm getting to know them as well, is they can build computers, and different things like that. So they're a very, very talented group of kids, or students, I should say. But a couple of them definitely have created their own games. And my plan in March, pre-COVID, was to say, hey, I would like to see a game. How did you create it? A lot of them are very heavily involved in, computer science, taking all of the IT classes so that they can, either build a computer or create these games on their own.
Awesome. Jason, did you want to add something onto that question?
I was just going to say, I know it's out there. I have a specific group of kids that are for my production team. They do all of our streaming. We have a Twitch.tv. We actually have a partnered Twitch channel. And so we broadcast everything we possibly can. And yeah, we had kids that didn't do esports that just wanted to be part of the production team, and we really encourage that. And that really is kind of the purpose of my Introduction to Esports Careers class, because that class is going to be less about playing and more about production and the careers aspects of things rather than that. I can also tell you that there is another group, highschool.gg, which is in Washington State, and their plan for content is more based on the production side than it is on any gaming side. So it's out there. Cool. It's just, it's such a slow growth thing.
Perfect. Some other questions. Is Magic the Gathering Arena likely to be available in the future?
I think that would be more up to the individual, like that would be up to HSCL or Play Versus. I don't really know anything about that.
CCGs are hard because there's there's equity issues with CCGs unless they have a good tournament mode that allows you access to every card. So there's definitely people that are doing Hearthstone out there. I want to say Magic has their own competitive structure, but there's nothing specific for the high school. I can say that I think that's league dependent more than anything else. I don't know of any leagues out there that are currently pursuing it, but I definitely have a lot of not schools. I have a lot of students who ask about it, but it depends. I don't know enough about Magic. I'm a Hearthstone player. Sorry, that I don't know. I know there's interest. It's just I don't think anybody's doing it right now. And that might even be a Wizards of the Coast thing. So.
Alrighty. So one question is, what leagues are everyone playing in? But then I'm going to transition this to the next question. Play versus and HSCL are two of the biggest leagues that people are playing in. The next question is, we heard about leagues HSCL, play versus for play. I know there's a cost associated to play for those. Is there anything happening locally or something without a pay to play wall?
I guess that kind of feeds into what I had said during my little bit, was that there are local tournaments that you can go to, or online ones, and a lot of the online ones are a lot of them are free, not all of them, and the costs for local tournaments tend to be pretty low. And then if for example, if O'Day hosted a tournament, both of the tournaments that we hosted were free. It was just, for community building and to get the guys some experience. Sorry, I say guys because I teach at all boys school. I apologize. To get the students experience. And then if you host your own, that's something you're free to do as well. Is if you want to throw it together and make sure there's no cost association with it, then that's a great way to get started.
Cool.
My program, we were part of HSCL for 2 years. That was where we started. The paywall was a big thing for us. We one of the downsides of HSCL is because it's national. You end up playing in a league that is California, and actually it's even worse on the West Coast because it was California, Idaho, California schools, but they also lumped all of the schools that were Mountain Time into our time zone that we were playing against. And because their games started at 5 o'clock, there was also that was the default time. It was always very difficult to coordinate games, and oftentimes we would have lots and lots of forfeits that were just made the games not fun. My Overwatch team, the last spring, that was our last semester or last season with them, was it's supposed to be 8 games. But we only ended up playing 4 games. The rest of them were forfeits. And it's hard to do something like that and then pay $240 for that because it was really big. We started this last year a local Washington State thing. We started with 7 schools in the fall, and we were playing Smash Ultimate and Rocket League. We did a winter season as well, and we are at 13 schools. So our sort of Washington State League that we've been trying to develop has been growing. And we're actually, we have plans in the work to apply for nonprofit status for that league, so that we can offer those Washington State schools local competition. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, again, I can put you on my email list. I've got about 42-ish schools on that email list right now. And if you would like to be added to that, again, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to add you to that when we're doing. We're hoping that we'll have our 501c3 status by the fall. In fact, I'm just waiting on, I have my application all filled out for the nonprofit status through Washington State. I'm just waiting on the address of one of our board members, and then that's all going to be ready to send out to go.
Awesome.
Jamie's laughing because I'm waiting for Jamie's address so that I can put it on there.
That's awesome.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, put you on blast in the front of everybody like that.
And there we go. And then I wanted to throw in a quick comment. So Micro K-12, we're working super close with Play Versus to help you guys get set up with the leagues. Also to offer equipment at education pricing. So we're always a resource for that. I wanted to make sure you all knew about that, because I know there's different leagues. But for the next question, have you noticed an increase or decrease in students gaming during class since you added an esports program?
That's an interesting question. None of my esports players would do it, but a lot of the non-esports players would still. Yeah, I don't know how much to address that. I mean, I guess my approach would be hey, there's a time and place, and this isn't it.
Right.
And kind of holding their spot in esports to a higher standard. Like, hey, look, you know, we're at a higher level now. You need to treat this with a bit more respect, type of thing. But yeah, other than that, my esports guys don't really. They save it for lunch.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've definitely gone into some classrooms where I see students gaming, because I have to go into a lot of classrooms because I'm the assessment coordinator, assessment and special projects coordinator. And so, you know, a lot of times I'll kind of start from the back of the classroom and work my way up, and I kind of look over and I'll say, hey, what game are you playing right now? And they kind of just, you know, put their phone down or whatever device that they have. But like Paul said, normally I see more students gaming during lunchtime. So I think just to piggyback off of what Paul said, is just to reiterate, like, okay, you're in class right now. That's what you need to focus on. You can save that for either, well, not in between classes, or not even enough time for that, but lunch or after school, or come to esports. So.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. They save it for lunch. They save it for after school. My IT department doesn't do a whole lot in terms of you know, blocking things like during the school day. I know a lot of IT departments, they deal with it differently. Some of them, like I've known some that they only open up the firewall for like specific hours of the day for esports programs. They're blocked the rest of the time. But like for us, we're pretty open all the time for it, and we really just view it as a classroom management thing more than an esports problem. The teachers who are in classrooms that have labs know that that's an additional challenge of classroom management that they have to deal with, and we do have software that stops it. We use net support, but you know, looking at chat, Chase says they use LAN schools. There's definitely a lot of things out there where you can see what's happening on a student's screen. My esports kids won't do it because they know that they know that that's how they lose things, and they're too passionate about esports to stop. But even in my class, because I do teach in a lab, they don't. It's not a problem. If it's a problem once, it's never a problem again. So
Cool. So I wanted to reiterate. Chase said, I use software lawn schools that allows me to block the games during school times, which is a good idea. And then Joel also had a good comment. Our middle school students had the same eligibility expectations as traditional athletes, so their overall behaviors and academics improved. And Jason does the same thing. So that's an awesome comment.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Great. We had one more question here in the Q&A. It says, how do we remove the stigma from first-person shooting games so students can have opportunities to develop their skills in a team environment to compete for scholarships? Those scholarships are available, but if school districts want to prove those games to be played, the students who are interested in those games are missing out on those opportunities, which is an awesome question to bring up.
I think that, so I actually had a student ask me a couple of weeks ago which games we play. And I actually emailed Jason about this. And they want to play, I believe it's called, they want to play COD. So now I let my two boys play COD. They're 11 and 7, but I told my husband, I said, I don't want them to play that game. Obviously my kids are little, they're not in high school. But what we did is we turned off all the blood and the bad words, et cetera, right? But obviously for high school students, they're not going to, probably don't want the blood turned off. So I think what Jason said rings true, that as long as administration is on board with these students playing these games and couple that with a permission slip from the parent, then I think that it's fine. That's my opinion, so.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually about to say the same thing. Like, to get the administration behind you, maybe show them some of the research that shows that there's no real adverse effects from these games. And then once the administration is on your side, then have those parents sign the waivers and just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just tackle on the same thing. There's definitely a lot of research out there that does show that violence in video games doesn't really lead to violence in life. Like, it's not a causal relationship.
Mhm.
So those are definitely things to highlight. The other thing that I would highlight is that there's definitely a difference between first-person shooters. Like the difference between Counter-Strike and Overwatch in terms of like the graphics, I think plays a big point. Counter-Strike is probably one of the most controversial because it's realistic guns, it's counter-terrorists versus terrorists. Like, there's a lot of things there that touch on some very controversial issues, and so that's one of the hardest ones to convince your high school to do. But Overwatch, on the other hand, it's not really realistic gun. It's definitely not realistic guns. Like, one of the characters in that game, if you're not familiar, is a monkey, and he has a lightning gun. So it's not like we're talking about realism. There's a character in that game that is a hamster inside a giant wrecking ball, mechanized wrecking ball. So, like, it's not realistic. That's a good place to start. It's not blood and gore. So I think Overwatch is probably the best game to be able to introduce people to that. It's still a popular game. You will find that there's kids that will scoff at Overwatch players, but that's just kind of that's a gamer thing, I think. And then I have high hopes for Valorant, which is very Counter-Strike like. But there's like magic powers and stuff, so it's not quite as realistic as Counter-Strike is. So I definitely think there's ways to get that same kind of gameplay in Valorant. But yeah, the research definitely, and then ease people into it. Overwatch is a great introduction game for adults that are not necessarily comfortable with shooters, because there's a lot of non-realism things about it. It's also just a great team game. When you talk about teamwork, Overwatch is much more teamwork oriented than other shooters are. And I think I honestly, in my opinion, it's one of the best high school esports ones. But yeah.
Awesome.
And just to go off of that, Valorant is going to be rated T, so that should be a selling point.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure Counter-Strike is rated. Is it rated M? I'm not a CS player.
I can't see how it wouldn't be.
Cool. Well, let's hope those get some traction with Valorant and such games. We are running out of time. So I just want to reiterate that Micro K-12 and all these amazing teachers are here for you guys. I know it can be overwhelming. I know there's hurdles. So feel free to email me, and I can help you guys out with as much as I can. And then I also want to encourage all of you to register for our next webinar. We'll have Boise State University there. They're an awesome program, in top 10 in the nation. Some local schools, Peninsula College, Centralia, some awesome information that we'll learn there. So we hope that you guys register for that one and see how the opportunities can expound past high school and K through 12. So we hope to see you all there, and I appreciate it again. So thank you all. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for coming, everyone.